In Geneva now, the P5+1, that's the US, Russia, China, Britain, France and Germany, are meeting with Iran in an attempt to negotiate some sort of restraint on behalf of Iran on its nuclear program in return for the lifting of sanctions. The emerging agreement appears to be not so much about details, but the structure of negotiations over the next 6 months or so. Iran has to convince the P5+1 and essentially the rest of the world that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, as it says it is. The world doesn't necessarily believe this, so is apprehensive about the notion of lifting sanctions too quickly at this stage. Israel fears that the US and the other members of the P5+1 are conceding too much, too early and too quickly. The concerns are about Iran's capacity to enrich uranium, its progress on a reactor which can produce plutonium, another nuclear explosive, and work Iran may be doing or has done in the past about designing an actual nuclear bomb. Prime Minister Netanyahu takes a maximalist approach on these issues, arguing 4 key points. 1. Iran must cease all uranium enrichment. 2. It must close the underground facility at Fordow and dismantle the advanced IR-2M centrifuges at Natanz. 3. It must allow the transfer out of the country of current stockpiles of enriched uranium. And 4. Iran must stop all work at the heavy water reactor at Arak, which will be able to produce plutonium. Saudi Arabia is frustrated, exasperated and angry. And actually, that's with the United States. It fears that these negotiations will confer on Iran the status of the acceptable power in the Gulf and the dominant power. And the idea that Iran can negotiate with the United States and somehow be recognized as being a responsible member of the international community just fills the House of Saud with complete dread. Saudi Arabia is already working on Plan B. It believes that Iran is going to have the status of a quasi-nuclear weapon state, even if it doesn't test a bomb. The idea that Saudi Arabia would actually take nuclear weapons from Pakistan to develop its own nuclear deterrent sounds fanciful. I can assure you it's a story that I've looked at and discussed for many years, and I believe there is an essence of truth in it. If it were to happen, it would change the Middle East entirely. The non-proliferation regime in the world, which is essentially a compromise between the powers which have nuclear weapons and the ones that don't, would collapse. At the very least, it would mean that every other country in the Middle East of any size would think also that it should acquire nuclear weapons. Iraq, Turkey, even some of the smaller Gulf states. Of course, there are arguments why you shouldn't do that, but the arguments will be thwarted by the sense that the United States is no longer the diplomatic power and isn't prepared to use its leverage to assure a non-nuclear world.